Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into three of the world's most fascinating economies: Brazil, India, and Vietnam. Now, you've probably heard them all called emerging markets, right? But as you're about to see, they're taking completely different roads to get to the top. All right, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by introducing our three giants. Then we'll break down what really fuels their economies. After that, we'll look at the foundations they're building on, meet their new consumer classes, and finally, see how each one plays on the global stage. So first things first. That label, emerging market, it can be kind of misleading, you know? It lumps all these incredibly different countries together. To really get what's going on, you have to look at them one by one. Let's start with Brazil. If you want to understand Brazil, just think of it as a natural resource powerhouse. I mean, its whole economic identity is literally pulled from the earth. We're talking powerful agriculture, huge mining operations, and major energy exports that are feeding and fueling countries all over the planet. Next up, we've got India. And this is a whole different story. India's power doesn't come from the ground. It comes from its people and their brain power. It's a services and tech engine fired up by a massive, young population that is just crushing it in software, IT, and all kinds of digital innovation. And rounding out our trio is Vietnam. Check the tag on your sneakers or the back of your smartphone. There's a pretty good chance it was made here. Vietnam has very smartly become a go-to global manufacturing hub, and it's being supercharged by global trade and a middle class that's growing like crazy. Okay, so three countries, three very different vibes. Now, let's pop the hood and see what's actually fueling these economic engines. What makes them go? So for Brazil, the engine runs on its natural gifts: soybeans, iron ore, oil. These are the big ones. This makes Brazil an absolutely critical supplier to the rest of us, for sure. But it also means its economy is strapped into the wild roller coaster of global commodity prices. Now, India is a total contrast. Its growth drivers are things you can't even touch. It's not about what you dig from the ground. It's about what you can build in the cloud. We're talking software exports, call centers, and just this huge wave of digital innovation that's pushing its economy forward. And then you've got our third model, Vietnam. Here, it's all about making stuff. Electronics, clothes, shoes, you name it, they're probably making it. This is a classic, super fast, export-driven growth story built on factories that are churning out physical goods for you and me. And that really brings us to the core of it all. You've got these three totally distinct models: Brazil, hooked on commodities; India, soaring on services and innovation; and Vietnam, absolutely dominating as a manufacturing machine. Each has its own strengths, and as you can see here, each has its own Achilles heel. All right, let's keep going. Because, you can have the most powerful engine in the world, but if the roads are terrible, you're not getting anywhere fast. Let's talk about infrastructure. And wow, this is where you see a huge split. On one side, you have Brazil and India, which are wrestling with some serious roadblocks. We're talking messy bureaucracy, backed up ports and roads, and in India's case, sometimes unreliable power. But then you have Vietnam, which has made infrastructure a top priority, pouring cash into world-class ports and modern industrial parks. And look, this isn't just some boring economic detail. This advantage means that big global companies see Vietnam as a safer, more efficient, and cheaper bet for building their products. It directly affects where billions of dollars of investment will flow. It's a huge deal. Okay, so all this growth creates jobs and makes people wealthier. But what happens to that money? For an economy to be truly healthy, its own people have to start spending. This brings us to the rise of the consumer. First, let's just be clear on what we mean by middle class in this context. We're talking about a growing chunk of the population that finally has some extra cash to spend after covering the basics. The expansion of this group is a fantastic sign that an economy is building demand from the inside out, which is key for long-term stability. Now, this chart, tells a really cool story about momentum. You see Brazil, which has a big middle class, but its growth has kind of stalled because of economic ups and downs. India's is definitely expanding, but that growth isn't spread out very evenly. And then look at Vietnam, just rapid, steady expansion. So let me put it this way. India has the massive population. I mean, the potential there is just enormous. But right now, Vietnam's consumer market is the most dynamic of the three. It may not be the biggest yet, but it's the one that's growing the fastest, and that makes it an incredibly exciting place for businesses. Okay, for our last round of comparison, let's zoom out. How do these economies actually plug into the rest of the world? How are they attracting foreign cash and playing the global trade game? Well, it turns out Each one attracts money by playing to its own unique strengths. Foreign money flows into Brazil for its resources. It floods into India for its incredible tech talent, and it pours into Vietnam to build factories, thanks to some really smart open trade policies. And speaking of that, Vietnam has been seriously aggressive with its strategy. Just look at the number 2 on your screen. That represents 2 massive free trade deals that Vietnam has signed, including one with the EU and the huge Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is a game changer because it weaves Vietnam deep into global supply chains, basically sending a giant signal to the world that says, we're open for business and we're a reliable alternative to China. So, let's wrap this all up. Brazil's path is incredibly powerful, built on its amazing natural wealth. But being so tied to commodity prices makes it really vulnerable to global shocks that are completely out of its control. India's story is all about amazing human talent and innovation. But for it to really truly take off, it has to get a handle on those tough domestic issues, fixing its infrastructure and tackling inequality. And finally, Vietnam. Its sharp focus on manufacturing and smart trade deals has made it a nimble, super competitive, and pretty much essential player in how the world makes things today. So, what's the big takeaway here? I think it's that there's no single one-size-fits-all way to emerge. You've got a resource giant, a service innovator, and a manufacturing star. Each strategy has incredible rewards and each has serious risks. Which leaves us with one final question to chew on. In a world that's always changing, which one of these models will prove to be the most resilient?